Want to listen to this episode ad-free? Head on over to our Patreon. That's patreon.com/Ivory Tower Boiler Room. For a limited time, we are offering free 1 week trials to our Patreon just so you can see all of the exciting audio and video episodes that you get to unlock as a Patreon member. And as an ITBR professor member, which is $10 a month, you receive access not only to our audio and video episodes, but also our monthly book club. This month, we are reading The Book of Gothel, a retelling of Rapunzel through the witch's eyes by Mary McMinn. Join us virtually on July 21st at 5 p.m. If you have any questions, please reach out to me at ivorytowerboilerroom@gmail.com. Please rate and subscribe to the podcast on Apple or Spotify. And please mention the podcast to one of your friends. It really helps get the word out there and it allows me to continue getting really exciting guests, Mary to continue her True Crime and Academia show, and Christian Garcia to continue to co host our rewatch show, whether it be Smash or Queer as Folk. And we are now on YouTube, so you can listen to the podcast on YouTube. So if you're a YouTube lover, we have you covered there as well. I hope you enjoyed today's episode.
Hey, true crime friends. Welcome back to another episode of True Crime in Academia. I am your host, Mary DePippi. I hope you have all had a wonderful week this week and past couple of weeks. I'm sorry, a neighbor is mowing their lawn right now. I don't know if my microphone is picking it up, but if you can hear that, I apologize. Please ignore. But I hope you have all I hope you all have had wonderful weeks, past couple of weeks. I've just been super busy and I don't hate it. It's been all good things, Just looking forward to, having a break this weekend. One of the things I want to do is I started reading this new book called The Guest List. Well, I mean, it's not new to me, like new as in the newest book I'm reading. But yeah, it's called The Guest List by Lucy Foley. It's on Reese's Book Club. And so far, so good. Only a couple chapters in. But yeah, so I'm excited. I will report back once I've read more, but that is one of the things I'm hoping to do this weekend. I was actually supposed to go plant shopping this weekend, but instead I decided to go other room furniture shopping, so my money was spent there and not on plants. So I'm a little sad about that, but don't worry. I mean, I know not to worry. Next weekend I will totally go, but just a little disappointing that I have to put that off. But I'm very excited for the new plants that I'm getting. I have some new pots to put them in and, just looking forward to sprucing my room up a little bit more, finding more storage for things, like more shelving and things like that for stuff that I want to display. So I'm just really excited about that. Anywho, this week's case is a rough one, so I want to issue a trigger warning. This episode does feature discussions of sexual abuse, especially of children. There are discussions of suicide as well as self-harm. So, if any of those things are triggering to you, I highly suggest that you just listen to the first part and then the last couple of minutes in the second part, just so that way you can get kind of caught up. I don't really go into too much detail. It's just kind of an explanation without so much graphic detail. Also, for this episode, I just want to throw out there that we're kind of just covering the main people involved in this case. So the victim and those directly involved with the victim's murder. The case itself has a lot of intricacies that you wouldn't understand unless you know some of these things and some of these friendships. So, we're going to take a quick little break and then we will get into this week's case.
Hi, this is Dr. Andrew Rimby. And when I'm not here with a podcast microphone in the ITBR, I am consulting with several clients. I have small business clients where I provide them social media strategies. I have writing clients. I've worked on college admission essays. I've worked on a graduate student's thesis. I've worked on journal article editing. And I also have worked with those who are creating a podcast or who have a podcast on social media and ideas for how to get their podcast out there and trying to target their audience. So if you are interested in any of my consulting services, you can just reach out to me at ivorytowerboilerroom@gmail.com or search Ivory Tower Boiler Room on Google, and you will see my phone number. So feel free to give me a call. The first hour is $30, and then we'll figure out what plan works for you after that. Okay, now back to the Ivory Tower Boiler Room. After Pride Month is over, sometimes it can be hard to find our favorite LGBTQ books, TV shows, films, even theater experiences. Well, don't worry, because I have the magazine for you. It is called The Gay and Lesbian Review, and their latest July and August issue just got released. It's called Sanctuary. Well, here is what editor Richard Snyder Jr. just described about the latest issue. He writes, the impulse for any minority to seek out safe spaces or sanctuaries exists in proportion to the oppression they suffer in their social world. From the catacombs of Rome to the colony of Plymouth, the upshot of this quest is well attested. Members of sexual minorities have undoubtedly been forming their own private communities for centuries. Would Plato's Symposium be an early example? But it was only in the 19th century that sexual identity became a criterion for forming associations of like-minded individuals. Well, this issue has everything. An article about Andy Warhol's factory, an article about how Nantucket became a gay haven, how a lesbian art colony formed in St. Augustine, even how a gay bar in San Antonio fought back and won for recognition of the LGBTQ community. So, the ITBR is so excited to partner with the Gay and Lesbian Review, who is offering an exclusive discount code. Head on over to glreview.org, click subscribe, and enter the promo code ITBR50, that is ITBR50, to receive 50% off any print or digital subscription. And make sure you follow at the GL Review on Instagram to see all of their latest news. I hope you enjoy your reading. While it's still summer, and I hope so many of you out there are enjoying beach days, I know that while I'm at the beach, I'll have a thought pop into my mind like, wait, what am I going to assign on my syllabus? What books do I want my students to read? I know if you are a college educator listening right now, or a student, or someone who just really enjoys and values academic writing and academic topics, I have a press that you need to know about. It's called Broadview Press, and it's an independent press. I've had a few of their writers on the podcast, including Dr. Sid Dobrin, who was recently on the podcast to talk about how artificial intelligence is changing the game for humanities education. Soon, I'm going to have Dr. Andrea Sullivan Clark on to talk all about philosophies on Turtle Island, especially indigenous philosophies. And what does she think about how pop culture looks at Native American narratives? If you are looking for a text to assign your students in the humanities classroom, Broadview Press has you covered. They have a book that just came out called Academic Writing Now, a brief guide for busy students. It is designed to cover the basics of a college writing course in a concise, student friendly format. Each chapter concentrates on a crucial element of composing an academic essay. It is available as an ebook for under $30, and it includes readings on contemporary issues like AI, climate change, and campus life. I'm so excited because Broadview Press has released an exclusive discount code, Ivory Tower, for 20% off your broadviewpress.com order. That's Ivory Tower for 20% off. Make sure you follow them on Instagram at Broadview Press. Enjoy all of your reading.
So, for this first episode, I kind of just wanted to lay the groundwork as far as the individuals in this case, starting with the victim and ending with those involved in her murder. And that's mainly because there's a lot of backstory for these individuals. So I wanted to make sure that we kind of went over certain situations and circumstances and things like that before we get into the nitty gritty of this case. So, like I said at the top, we're kind of laying the groundwork here, and then in next week's episode, we will be getting into the details of what happened, the case, and how all of these individuals are interconnected. And even though it's no justification, why this happened. So let's start off by talking about the victim of our case, Shanda Sharer. Shanda Renee Sharer was born on June 6, 1979, in Pineville, Kentucky, to parents Stephen and Jacqueline Sharer. Before middle school, Shanda's parents divorced, and her mother moved to Louisville, Kentucky. While living in Louisville, Shanda attended the St. Paul School and was involved in cheerleading and played volleyball and softball. She was a very athletic and normal and social kid. I mean, these are all team sports, team events. So, you know, she seems like she can make friends easily if she's just throwing herself, or not even just that it's easy for her, but that she's comfortable because she's wants to be in all these activities. During this time, Shanda's mom remarried and divorced. The two then moved to New Albany, Indiana in June of 1991. One of the sources that I read stated that it was to be closer to Shanda's father, who was living there at the time. Shanda was initially enrolled in Hazelwood Middle School, but early in the year, she transferred to a Catholic school called Our Lady of Perpetual Help and joined the girls' basketball team. Now, just kind of like put a pin in Hazelwood Middle School. It's gonna come back in the next episode. There was a reason why she transferred. But like I said, we will get into that into the next episode. I want to point out that Shanda seems very well adjusted. And like I said, I think she's very social for the fact that she's enrolling and trying out for all of these team sports in the different schools that she goes into. For some children, and even me myself, like I completely have had this feeling of just being unsettled and like kind of displaced when you move around too much. So, you know, it just seems like she's been coping with it well and, you know, just doing her thing, trying to just make friends and be on all the sports teams. Sadly, in the early morning hours of January 11th, 1992, Shanda was lured from her home by a group of girls that she knew through a friend at Hazelwood Middle School. Again, we'll talk about that more next week. The last 9 hours of her life would be filled with horrific torture and inhumane abuse, all before being burned alive.
It's officially beach season, which means I need all of my favorite Bath and Body products, but this time I need beachy scents. Well, my favorite Bath and Body boutique, the Soapbox NY, has me covered. From Farmhouse Fresh, my favorite company for all things face masks and retinol creams, to Finchberry, a beautiful bar of soap that looks like a slice of cake. I especially love the emerald one because it reminds me of the Wizard of Oz. I also love Wavertree in London. They have summer cocktail scents like peach Bellini, prosecco, and so much more. They also have a blending bar with over 200 essential oils. So Janine, the co-owner, she knows my favorite scent is French vanilla and almond. So I've had the body wash, the bubble bath, the body lotion, if you don't live on Long Island, which I don't live on Long Island anymore, I still am getting my favorite products because the Soapbox NY has an extensive website as well as an Instagram and TikTok where you can place your orders by just DMing Janine. So if you do live on Long Island, definitely make a day trip out to Port Jefferson. It's a beautiful beach town. So you can follow the Soapbox NY on Instagram and TikTok. That's at the Soapbox NY. And you'll see all ways to contact them. I hope that you enjoy all of their products as much as I do. I mean, I now have gotten all my family and friends addicted to the Soapbox NY. So if I can get more of you out there addicted to their Bath and Body Boutique, the better. Were you a fan of the TCM Turner Classic Movie Network and you couldn't wait to see what classic movie they were going to premiere? And when you went to Hollywood slash MGM studios in Disney World, you would always go to the Great Movie Ride. I absolutely loved the Great Movie Ride, especially when we landed in the Wizard of Oz scene and the Wicked Witch of the West came out from a heap of smoke and confronted Dorothy and Glinda. Well, I have a podcast for you. My good friend Christian Garcia's podcast is called That Old Gay Classic Cinema. So he combines classic cinema analysis with a queer study angle. So some of his recent episodes include Singing in the Rain, Breakfast at Tiffany's, Cat on a Hot Tin Roof, Sunset Boulevard with our good friend Janine Cucci, the co-owner of the Soapbox NY. Alfred Hitchcock's Strangers on a Train, The Philadelphia Story, and so much more. You can listen to his podcast wherever you get your podcasts, like Apple or Spotify. And every Friday, I release a new That Old Gay Classic Cinema episode because he is now part of the ITBR network. I am now releasing his episodes on the ITBR podcast. So make sure that you have a listen because I was on his first episode talking all things The Sound of Music, which, if you didn't know, I was Captain Von Trapp when I was in high school. So make sure you follow him on TikTok and Instagram at That Old Gay Classic Cinema and rate, subscribe, do all the things, and please help support my friend Christian's podcast. I know you're going to love it.
So before we get into each individual who is responsible in some way, shape, or form in Shanda's murder, I just want to point out that there is no rhyme or reason for the order of these people. It was just the way that I was able to figure out the best to introduce everyone. Also, just a reminder of the trigger warning that, especially in this part, there is discussions of self-harm, suicide, and sexual assault and abuse. So, again, if that is not your thing, no shame. Just go to the last couple minutes of the episode, just so that way you can be caught up and ready for part 2 of this case series. So, first up we have Hope Anna Rippey. Hope Anna Rippey was born on June 9th, 1976 in Madison, Indiana. Her parents divorced just before her 6th birthday, and she and her siblings moved with their mother to Quincy, Michigan for 3 years. Now, Hope claimed that living in Michigan was a somewhat turbulent time for her and her family. Eventually, her parents decided they wanted to give their relationship and marriage another go, and the whole family reunited in Indiana. Now, be it other traumas that she faced, or maybe she was just trying to fit in with her old childhood friends that she had just reunited with, Laurie Thackett and Tony Lawrence, but she began to self harm at age 15. Hope's friend Tony Lawrence was born on February 14th, 1976, in Madison, Indiana, as well. Sadly, at a young age, she faced abuse and sexual assault. At 9 years old, she was abused by an adult relative, and I couldn't find specifically like what happened. I'm assuming it was of a sexual nature, but I'm not 100% sure. And at 14, she was raped by a teenage boy. Now, Tony went to the police, but only an order to stay away from Tony was issued to the teenage boy, and he never saw a day in jail, let alone a day in court for what he did to her. She attended counseling after her attack, but she didn't go on to continue it. Soon after, she began to self harm, and in the 8th grade, she attempted suicide. Hope and Tony's friend, Mary Lorene, or Laurie, as she was known to most people, Thackett, was born on October 5th, 1974, in Madison, Indiana. She's also the oldest of this group of girls. She was raised by a Pentecostal Christian mother and a 2-time felon father who worked in a factory. Laurie has claimed that she was molested at least twice, once at the age of 5 and the other at the age of 12, but I couldn't find any information or find out if it was a family member, her father, or someone else entirely. Sadly, both of her parents were abusive. In May of 1989, Laurie and her mother got into an argument about her changing from her dress to jeans at school. After this argument, Laurie's mother attempted to strangle her. Social workers from CPS were called immediately and involved, and Laurie's parents agreed to unannounced visit from CPS in order to ensure that no abuse was happening. I'm not sure if the social workers worked out some sort of deal or whatever with the parents, or it was just the times, or, sadly, how sometimes like it happens where the system's just messed up and overworked and understaffed. So it's hard to say, but this was, the situation. She was allowed to be left in the house. So, Laurie started to rebel after she turned 15. She became obsessed with the occult and would pretend to be obsessed by the spirit of, quote, Deanna the vampire, end quote. She started self-harming after being in a relationship with a girl who also self-harmed. When her parents discovered what was going on and that she was severely harming herself, they checked her into a hospital. So again, even though they're horrible people, technically, at least they're trying to do right by her now, so, Anyway, when she was in the hospital, she was prescribed antidepressants and released, but was quickly back in the hospital just a few days later. While hanging out with her girlfriend and her friend, Tony Lawrence, Laurie attempted suicide. This time when she was hospitalized, she was diagnosed with borderline personality disorder, or BPD. She also told doctors that she had experienced hallucinations since she was a child, which is another symptom. But normally this disease doesn't present itself until adulthood. But again, being a teenager, just close enough. It's not totally impossible for a child or teenager to be diagnosed with this. It's just, like I said, symptoms normally don't come about until adulthood. She was discharged from the hospital on April 12th, 1991, and that September she sadly dropped out of high school for whatever reason. She then couch surfed at various friends' houses, and in November she met another girl named Melinda Lovelace. At some point during her couch surfing days, her father reached out and pleaded for her to come back home and even bribed her by saying that he would buy her a car if she did so. And she did. Well, sort of, because she was mostly out spending her time with her new friend, Melinda. Melinda Lovelace was born the youngest of three on October 28th, 1975, in New Albany, Indiana. Melinda's father was drafted during the Vietnam War and climbed the ranks actually to a sergeant. But like most of the men and women that come home from active duty, he suffered from mental health issues, and his violent tendencies and abusive tendencies just completely exploded, and he also became an alcoholic. Extended family members of the Lovelaces would say that when Melinda and her older sisters visited, they were often hungry and were pretty much told that they were not getting fed enough food at home. The constant abuse Melinda's father inflicted on his wife and his daughters were sexual, verbal, and physical in nature. It was so bad for Melinda's mother that she had attempted suicide multiple times during Melinda and her sisters' childhoods. Also, during this time, Melinda's father would only ever be convicted, like, of all of the crimes that he has committed against his wife and children. The only thing he was ever convicted of at the time was of battery, because he had beaten Melinda's mother so horribly that she had to be hospitalized. Now, there was a 2-year period in Melinda's life when she was around 5 when her parents became heavily involved in the Graceland Baptist Church. However, though, at one point the church had Melinda taken to a motel room to undergo an exorcism with only a 50-year-old strange man in the room with her. Now, from my research, I have not seen if she has ever come out and spoken about this and what happened, but I can't imagine anything good happened. In November of 1990, after Melinda's mother attacked her husband with a knife, and he had actually cut himself because he attempted to grab the knife. I mean, to say he cut himself, I guess, is maybe a stretch. You know, at this point, I was just pissed off with him when I was writing this. So, you know, I just wanted to blame his own injury on himself, okay? So, but anyway, because she went and attacked him, he wound up cutting himself with the knife because he attempted to grab it. He had to go to the hospital for his injuries, and while that's happening, Melinda's mother attempted suicide again. But Melinda and her sisters called the authorities for help, so she was able to survive. After this incident, Melinda's father filed for divorce and moved to Florida. He sent letters to Melinda, but he mainly just played on her emotions until he cut off contact with her completely. Now, the extent of her father's abuse towards her and her sisters, whether it be sexual, verbal, or physical in nature, is not known. The wife, Melinda's mother, has talked about it and her specific experiences with the abuse that she's faced from him. But as far as Melinda and her sisters are concerned, they have been very tight-lipped. Melinda specifically has not really said anything from what I can find. I saw that the older two did say that their father had molested them. It is also mentioned in a later court case of his saying what he had done to Melinda, at least, like I said, in the court documents. It's in the Wikipedia link. So if you go to that one and really, if you want to know all of the horrific details of what this poor family experienced at the hands of this man, by all means, go for it, take a look. But that, is all we will get into on this show. Of course, what these girls went through at during their childhoods and their teenage years is horrible, most of them. They all seem to go through some sort of trauma. And, even though that is the case and it's really sad and horrible and unfortunate, it does not excuse what they do, which we'll talk about in part 2. However, I want to point out that the horrific things that happened, the traumas, the abuse, everything, this did shape their level of decision making and how they chose to come to the conclusions and decisions they eventually do. Basically, it does explain the thought process, but like I said, it does not excuse what they've done. So with that, I want to point out some of the things that obviously contributed to their mental health and, mental state. So the first thing that always sticks out to me when looking at a violent person and wondering why they made the decisions that they did is to see if they have a history of childhood abuse. And sadly, 3 of the 4 girls in this group have experienced that in some way, shape, or form. Again, it could be possible that all 4 did experience types of abuse. Of the 4, it feels that Hope had the more normal, stable family life to some degree. But like I said, we don't know what her traumas were, if any, during that turbulent time in her life when her siblings and her mom were living in Michigan. So we can't 100% say that nothing horrible happened to her, but something happened to her to make her maybe be more impressionable or just alone and wanting to find a group of people where she felt she fit in. Obviously, I can't say for sure, but that is, my guess. The next thing that we have is obviously mental health. All of these girls seem to have some sort of mental health issue. They all participate, or I hate to say participate. I've been seeing that in my research, and I don't like that because it's not something you want to participate in. Like, just participate, like there's a willingness. And yes, obviously that is the case, but you participate in a sport, you participate in a book club, you participate in church, you don't participate in self-harm. You do it. But anyway, so obviously, like I said, the 4 all do self-harm. So one could argue that there would be a lot of depression and other types of issues going on, especially coupled with the fact that there is probably unprocessed abuse and trauma they have stored in their brains. And I always point this out, but your brain isn't fully formed until like your mid-20s. So things like trauma, drug use, things like that can really alter the way your brain forms, obviously. And some of those things can lead to a susceptibility to violence, like to commit violence, things like that. Remember, I'm not a licensed anything, just a mental health and psychology enthusiast over here. And speaking of, one of the girls we know has bipolar disorder, or I'm sorry, not bipolar, borderline personality disorder, BPD. I think they both are called BPD sometimes. Anyway, I'm probably wrong. But symptoms of that include like a strong fear of abandonment, mood swings, anger, impulsiveness, things like that. So next week when we get into the crime itself and Lori Thackett's role in it specifically, you can kind of see how this borderline personality disorder reflects her decision making. So, with that, that is all I have for you, my loves. Please don't forget to follow True Crime in Academia on social media at True Crime in Academia on Instagram, Threads, and TikTok. And just so you know, we no longer have an X account because, well, fuck Elon Musk. So, yeah, I can't remember if I said that on last week or the last episode. So, just a reminder that there is no longer an X account. Also, if you would like to listen to this episode ad-free, go to patreon.com/Ivory Tower Boiler Room and become a subscriber today. All right, my darlings, I hope you all enjoy the rest of your week. Stay safe, stay healthy, and until next time, I will see you all later.